Welcome to Unveiling Islam with you, Rashid. This time I'm starting because David will be asked some serious questions.
Oh, yeah? What kind of serious questions?
I heard that you became a Christian believer after many years of being an atheist. Is that true?
Yeah, that was early in my life. I just didn't care. There was no church or anything like that. I eventually had to go to church when I would visit my grandmother, and I would just go in there and I would sit by the clock and I would just stare at the clock the entire time until they let me go because they would have donuts downstairs and so on. But other than that, I paid no attention. I had no idea about anything. It just wasn't an issue. God and so on. I'm not sure exactly.
How did you become an atheist?
I didn't realize I was probably like 13 or something like that when I realized that I never believed in God and I believe in anything. But for most of my life, it's not an issue. I'm not even thinking about it. And then at some point around 13, then I realized I don't believe in anything these Christians actually say. And it's weird because I don't actually like sharing how I became a Christian. I love hearing how Muslims became Christians.
Oh, yeah. But you don't want to share your own story.
It's this weird situation because I became a Christian in jail. It's not that it's embarrassing. I embarrass myself all the time. I have no problem embarrassing myself. I became a Christian in jail, and then I spent years in prison. And then, so every Christian I knew had a criminal background. For the first several years, I was a Christian. So everyone's a criminal. Everyone has this dramatic story and so on of their life. And then I got out of prison, and people wanted me to speak in church and give a testimony and stuff. And I would, share my background. But people would come up to me afterwards, and people would actually come up to me and say, yeah, I don't really have a testimony. I just, I came from a good Christian family, and my mom was always praying for me every time we went out the door, and I've just always been a Christian. And I'd be like, you think you don't have a testimony? That's like me. Every Christian I knew early on was a criminal. So, that's the amazing thing is any idiot can fall down a hill, right? That's just gravity.
Well, you just think they don't have as fascinating story as yours.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Why did you, I followed your videos. I know why, but I'm asking for the sake of those who do not know. Why you went to jail?
Yeah, that was, I was eventually diagnosed with something called antisocial personality disorder. That's what psychopaths and sociopaths have. Okay. We don't form normal emotional attachments to other people. We don't respect other people's rights and so on. But when you're a little kid, you don't know that you have a problem. So I was a little kid, and I started eventually concluding that I was better than everyone else. It started off, the first time I remember, I was 5 years old, and I'd had a dog as long as I can remember. I don't remember a time where I didn't have this dog named Goliath. And the dog eventually died, and my mom's, she had tears in her eyes, and I was thinking, so what? It's a dog. Did you think the dog was going to live forever?
Yeah, for you, it was logic that.
Yeah, I thought there's something wrong with my mom, and then as time goes on, I found out other people react like this, and then eventually I realized even when people die, I have no reaction, and so you don't know that this is actually a mental problem. I'm thinking, oh, you guys are all inferior. You're controlled by your emotions, and I'm just this pure. Logic machine. So I concluded that I had evolved to a higher stage of humanity or something like that, and that
So how did you go to jail?
I attacked my dad with a hammer, and that's when at first they put me in a mental hospital, and they examined me, and that's when they concluded that I have a problem, the antisocial personality disorder, and so I got locked up for attacking my dad.
For how long?
I got a 10-year sentence eventually. But first it was a psychiatric hospital, then jail. And then I was in jail, and there in a dorm, there was a Christian there. And this was a Christian. He had turned himself in for 21 felonies. This guy walked into a police station after becoming a Christian, confessed to everything he'd ever done, and then he's in jail with me. But he would sit up on his bunk reading his Bible, and one day I just walked up to him and I said, hey, you know why you're reading the Bible? You're reading the Bible because you're born in the United States. If you've been born anywhere else, you believe in something else. If you've been born in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you've been born in Saudi Arabia, you'd be a Muslim. If you've been born in China, you might be a Buddhist.
That's true to a certain extent.
Yeah, but that's the view. It's like people just see, you all believe what you're told to believe, whereas me, I don't believe that stuff.
I choose what I believe,
which is nonsense, because I mean, I was taught, I was taught that the universe, exploded, the Big Bang, and life formed out in the ocean, and these are things, no one ever proved these things to me. You just pick these things up and you believe them. And so it was an interesting situation, because this guy started challenging me on things I believe. Like, I thought I could explain the origin of Christianity. You've got Jesus. He's going around with his followers. He dies. They want to keep things going. So they say he rose from the dead. Pretty straightforward, until you start finding out the actual historical background. That doesn't make any sense.
So he challenged you, and then...
Yeah, and lots of it was just like questioning what I would say. Like, really? Why do you believe that? And I was like, well, why do I believe that? I just heard it somewhere, and that's what I'm accusing this guy of. This is exactly what I'm accusing this guy of. But he kind of annoyed. We became friends. We would hang out and stuff. But he would annoy me when we were in these conversations, because I thought, hey, I'm supposed to be superior to this dumb guy, and he's beating me in these arguments. And so we eventually got into this fasting battle. Like, he wasn't trying to defeat me in fasting. He was just fasting. He would say, hey, I'm never going to have an opportunity to do long-term fasting except for when I'm in jail, so I'm going to do it now. And I was doing it. I was fasting just to beat the Christian. And eventually, I lost so much weight that they put me in a cell. They thought I was trying to starve myself. I'm trying to beat the Christian, and they think I'm trying to starve myself to death, right? But I was back there, and I was like, I'll study all this stuff, and I'll study all these arguments and so on, and then I'll go back out of here, and I'll destroy this guy. And eventually, some things started bothering me. One was like just design in the world. I was looking around at the blocks in my cell and how they're arranged, and I finally figured out, I was like, if someone told me this formed on its own in this order, I would think that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And yet I believe that life formed on its own. And so why do I not see the problem there? Why would this be absurd to think it happened on its own? But I believe that life, which is way more complicated than some bricks stacked on top of each other, why do I believe that formed on its own? And then it was eventually a version of what's now considered the moral argument. I thought I'm inventing this stuff as I go along, these arguments, but it turns out these arguments have been around a long time. Yeah. So the moral argument was, hey, I think I'm, superior to other people, and that I'm a higher. What's the standard?
Well,
what's the standard? Yeah. So there's is there a standard of better and so on? And if that's the case, then how am I better? I'm a guy in a jail cell for attacking my dad. In what way am I this greatest thing?
That's right.
And so there was that, and really what sealed it was the resurrection. When I found out, it had a lot to do with how the apostles died, and these guys go into their horrible, bloody deaths, preaching that Jesus had risen from the dead and appeared to them. And I was trying to think of anyone in history who made something up and then was willing to go out and die for it. Because keep in mind, jihadis and so on will die for what they believe, but it's something they heard and then they believed. The apostles were dying for something they claimed they saw.
True.
So they either saw this stuff or they're making it. I thought they had made it up, but it wasn't making any sense for them to make it up and then to go out and die.
Liars are bad martyrs.
Liars make poor martyrs. Right? Like, maybe you get one just crazy nut who would die for something he made up, but like all these guys are willing to die for it.
Yeah.
And so this started bothering me, and it really just got down to the point where I was like, what have I got to lose here? I'm in a jail cell. They're about to send me to my third mental hospital. And what if I pray and like nothing happens? And so I eventually just got down on my bunk and I prayed. I said, God, I don't know if I'll believe in you tomorrow, but I believe in you right now, and went through a kind of, sinner's prayer that I read in some tracts and Bible studies. And I sat up, and just the entire world looked different. Like everything had changed colors somehow, but it was like I was in a different place. And so I still had several years to go in prison, but I used it to study the Bible and so on. Got out, went to college, got married, had a bunch of kids, and here we are.
How did you become interested in Islam and studying the Quran? It's weird, like from atheism, Christianity, suddenly you jump to Islam.
Yeah, I'm actually more interested. I would actually be more interested in dealing with arguments of atheists, but I realized back then, like, everyone who's interested in apologetics is going into dealing with atheism, and almost no one's dealing with Islam when it's so big. But mainly it was just my best friend in college was a Muslim. So I'd learned a little bit about Islam in prison from, interacting with the Muslims there. But
Nabil,
in college,
you're talking about
Nabil Qureshi. We became best friends in college. And it took 4 years of discussions with Nabil. He eventually became a Christian. I thought, cool, I'm done with Islam. No more Islam. I don't have to deal with this anymore.
It was just the beginning.
Yeah, and it was just because, on the one hand, I learned very quickly, wow, Muslims make really cool Christians. I was watching the stand that Nabil took for Jesus. I was like, Muslims make really cool Christians. And the other thing was, he starts receiving death threats.
Right.
It took him a month to get his first death threat on his car, and he wasn't even announcing that he was a Christian. And so there it was. I'm not leaving him. I'm not leaving him to deal with this on his own. And so I'm going to be there with you, and never look back.
Well, that's really good. You think right now that Islam is more important than atheism to study? Still have the same idea?
Well, you have. It depends. I mean, if you're thinking of if you're a Christian who's interested in going into something, you're not sure what to go into. They're both important. They're both massively important. They both have adherents out there spreading their ideas left and right. But I would say, given the amount of the world's population, you're dealing with around 2 billion Muslims now, and that the emphasis in Christian apologetics hasn't really been in Islam.
True.
And so I would say that, go with, if you're really interested in something, go with that. If you aren't sure what to go into and you're looking for something, Islam's probably a pretty good.
Or you can do both.
Yeah, you can absolutely do both. And so all you Christians are watching out there, one more thing, one more piece of advice I would have for those of you out there. If you have a friend who's Muslim, Buddhist, Mormon, whatever, might be a good idea. You should be thinking to yourself, maybe God put me here for a reason, and so maybe I need to do a little study in here and learn how to interact with this person, because you might be the right person for that. Just as Randy was the right person for me to interact with, and Nabil was good for interacting with me.